But the only time we do against Michigan State, their action.
Senior,
Because we have each other.
was this casual day today or were you there?
There's his Roscoe, he's presenting on the beach.
That's right.
I wasn't going to say anything about your short pants, or if you couldn't get your big boy pants on today or something.
My board member came in last week and said, "Oh, I see it's casual day," and I said, "Board members are supposed to let me know before they show up."
Someone over there at the wall. Steve, there you are. You were off in somewhere.
No, I was over anything.
Oh, you were listening.
They offer some of the land.
My apologies.
I wasn't saying it to you.
Non-major don't run phone.
That's okay. Thank you.
You like being an architect so far, though?
Well, I always do. That's,
She highlights it, she'll have everything highlighted.
that's exactly right. You have the whole damn thing memorized.
I don't realize, I just didn't see.
Marie,
I know, I'm just
okay.
trying to do the thing.
I don't want you to let the night go away.
At the rate it's going with this agenda, are you kidding? Okay, our meeting's gonna be officially coming to order. It's 1 minute after 6. It appears as if we have a huge agenda, so hopefully everybody brought their drinks and snacks with them. So here we go. We need a roll call.
Ms. Howe?
Here.
Ms. Butler-Challenger here. Mr. Wisswasser?
Here.
Mr. Almarigi?
Here.
Mr. Benzi?
Here.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Here,
Mr. Fewens-Bliss?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, civil reflections, we're gonna have a pledge of allegiance and then a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, item 3, approval of the agenda. Any additions, subtractions? I have one. I'd like to move one of the items, J, which would be 13, as a two-way communication during public comments. I'd like to move it, if I could, to, hang on here, to your unfinished business items for action, right after our closed session. So I don't know if that becomes, if J goes there, if it becomes a C. But that's where I'd like to put it. So, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes.
Is it 13B?
J.
It will be 13, well, 14, I'm sorry, new business, hang on. Just on schedule, it's, because I want to move J, that part I know.
And move it to there.
And I want to move it then to B as in boy, items for action under 13.
So 13B.
So
C.
it becomes a C, is
Okay.
that what, okay, and
So
then
what-
everything else goes, is that what, so the J becomes a C?
Why are you doing that?
Did- Why am I doing that?
Yeah.
Or-
Yes.
Oh, I'm doing that because I would like to see that particular item voted on early. It's gonna be a long day. And I want to make sure that that one was taken care of. So that's the two-way communication. Is there a problem with moving it?
No, it doesn't make much sense to me, but
Okay, no, that's okay. That's,
Mr. Almarigi?
Aye.
Supported it?
yes.
Okay. Mr. Rosecrans?
Yeah,
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we have a disclosure of conflict of interest? Anybody? Doesn't appear that we do. Public statement 1, and that would be item 5. And understand I have to give you something on the agenda. Okay? Doesn't seem to be any takers. Items, oh, I'm sorry.
Did you call for public comment?
Judy's.
Okay. Went too fast.
Good evening. My name is Judy Gardia, and I'm chairperson of the Senior Services Advisory Board. I want to thank Karen for providing you with additional information last week about the Senior Center and what's happening right there at the current time. But I just wanted to remind you that about 6 months ago, we presented to you the 2021 through 23 Bath Charter Township Senior Services Strategic Plan. This was approved by you, or accepted by you, I should say, excuse me. And the last goal is to expand the senior center. Objective 1, develop cost estimates and conceptual plans for expanding the senior center at its current location. The primary responsibility there is listed as the Bath Township Administration, with the secondary responsibility being that of the trustees, because we do need some resources in order to move that part of this strategic plan forward. We are seeing an increase in the senior population in Bath Township. According to the American Community Survey, it's projected that the 2022 population of seniors over the age of 60 in Bath Township is going to be 26%. I just feel that we have to think about the future and plan for the future, and this is part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy. Is there anyone else? Okay. I don't see anyone. I don't look to see if that was Adam. That we have anybody from state, federal, other agencies? Okay. Item 7 is the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll do the first.
You did the first? That's correct.
I'll do the second.
All right. Al's got the second.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on page 2. The minutes. 8, item 8.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the regular Board of Trustee meeting of July 18th, 2022 as presented.
This is as it is in the packet, not as we got it in the email. Okay.
Okay. Because I wanted to talk about the email for that second. My comments that I made didn't have anything with an agenda, it had everything to do with minutes. So I'm not sure what that meant. You were talking about the agenda, I was talking about minutes.
If
So
you
what
wanted to
say-
put your comments,
In the minutes,
well, we've already approved the
Okay.
minutes of June 21st, so you
That's
can't
correct.
amend those minutes.
well, you can amend it, but that's okay. I got it.
All 7 board members approved them.
Yep.
So after they're approved, they
It's called
cannot be
mulligan.
amended.
You go back all the time and do that stuff. Okay, no, and that's, I wanted to make sure you understood that it didn't have anything to do with the agenda.
Correct,
Okay, it always had something to do with the minutes.
correct.
So when the minutes were given, it wasn't there, but Ryan's comments were, mine weren't. Or would that be the next?
But at the next meeting, when you approve the
Right.
minutes, that's when you should have made your statement.
Okay. Okay, that's, all right, we'll go on then. And that's over, but that's okay.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes, and that's for July 18th, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Approval of vouchers. Item 9.
I'll make a motion to approve the vouchers.
Support.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Okay, item 10 is the treasury report.
The thing I have for you folks tonight is you have your normal voucher reports, and everything you received and placed on file, but I also give you a copy of the second quarter of 2022, which also includes the first quarter, I might add. General fund investment policy is for investments as required by law, I'm supposed to provide you. If you have any questions on that, I can speak to it. You'll notice that we did make a change in the second quarter. We did buy a treasury note, in the neighborhood of around $4 million, at a rather lucrative, interest rate at the time. And that's gonna make a big difference in our, it's a 2-year note, it's gonna make a big difference in our interest income over the next couple of years, which should help us with some of our budgeting processes. Any questions, I'm happy to share it with you. The policy or the list is what it is. They haven't changed much over the last year.
Quick question.
Yep.
The general fund. Your 01322 or 022822. Is that second quarter?
I have no idea what you're looking at.
First page.
Okay. This is all the first quarter on the first page.
Okay,
The second quarter is on the second page.
okay, got it.
For of April of 2022 would be your first month of the second quarter, and obviously the end of June would be your last quarter. In the banking world.
So they go side by side?
Yep.
Okay. Gotcha. So what you're saying, if I'm understanding, we had 900, first page, first quarter, February, we had $965,394.13.
That's not correct.
Okay, that's what I needed to,
If you look over here where it says first quarter, there's a typo at the top, I see what you're talking about now, where it says 02/31 of 22, that should be 03. If you look down there at the bottom, you'll see your general fund total is $7,030,924.49. Your investment side of the general fund is $4,856,392.94. That represents the amount of money that's invested out of your $7 million. The rest of it would be $2,174,530 would be general fund sweep account money.
so, okay. So we have over $4.5 million invested.
No, you got $4,856,392.94. You got a lot more than more.
Well, 4.5, you know,
No, you got
4.7.
$4,800,056,392.
Okay, when you speak of that,
That's
and
the
then-
total of everything on
Okay.
that line from where it says Huntington Securities all the way to the bottom.
right,
Where it
those
says
are
Michigan
investments.
Glass, local pool.
Okay. So then, does that include fund balance?
What fund
Is it-
balance?
Well, that's what I mean, any fund balance.
Sure.
Okay,
This is your pool fund, general fund account.
okay. Okay.
By law, I'm supposed to provide you with a general fund account investment list. This is what this is. This does not include enterprise funds, it does not include any other funds, or
Right.
anything included in there.
And the difference between the general fund and your investment,
The general
Is
fund and
what?
the investment is the same thing. The general fund number you see up there is your general fund checking, that's what CPA stands for. That's the combination of your checking and your sweep account, that's for $2,174,531.55.
okay, we don't have that wrong. Because I'm trying to see the difference between these two, the general fund and the investment.
The difference between the two is down at the bottom. Down at the
Right.
bottom is the general fund total of $7,030,924.49. You subtract out the $2,174,531.55, and that leaves you with investment fund totals of $4,856,392.94.
Then what's
I don't
that?
have to by law give you that top number, but I do, so you have an idea
No,
how much
I-
money you had you're working with in regards to how much your cash flow is, what you have, versus the money you have that's tied up in securities and investments.
So the 2 million is,
That's your cash flow right now.
Cash flow,
Currently,
gotcha.
at the end of that month, at 3/31/2022, that was your cash flow, available cash flow that you could take and access
okay,
for anything you wanted to use it for, within the boundaries of the general fund and special revenue funds that's connected to pool fund accounts.
okay, thank you. Any other, was there only one of the questions? Okay. I don't know that we have to report or approve that. I go into, we don't need to approve, like you say, you don't need to,
We're just
To be-
accepting it, placing
so,
it on
yep.
file, and I need to report that basically all you have to do.
Yep.
The auditor will read this every quarter to make sure that it's been done.
yep. All right, item 11, committee appointments, there doesn't seem to be any. Item 12, township committee reports, doesn't seem to be any. Item 13, unfinished business. Items and introduction. You're on, Laura.
Thank you. I don't have any attachments. I'm just giving a quick verbal update on where I'm at with receiving quotes from 3 professional audio and visual companies that I reached out to. I have had 2 come out to the township to take a look at the boardroom and the equipment that we currently have, and discuss with me the issues that we are having and what we would like to have moving forward. So far, I have received 1 quote back, and I should receive the other within the next 2 weeks. I have not received any communication back from the 3rd company that I reached out to, so if I don't receive any communication from them before I get this 2nd quote, then I'll most likely just move forward with those 2. Happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Any questions? Doesn't seem to be any.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, items for action. Apparently, we have a closed session. This one considers material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute. So, take a vote on closed session.
Move to enter into closed session.
Second.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes-Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger? Yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Thank you.
Push me in.
So you guys want to get away?
I figured it out. It's about 16 inches long to get me here, and I think you got about 30 or 40.
Well, then I suggest you go first.
I don't want them. That's my point.
All right, we're going to call it back from the open meeting, and now we're in session again.
Forgot where you were.
No, that's true, I did, all of a sudden. Okay. We're at the closed session, so we need to vote on coming back in to session.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the closed session and resume the regular session.
Second.
Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes-Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes.
All right. Because we amended the agenda, this two-way communication is really simple. This is a vote up, a vote down. So you all understand what two-way communication is. So do I have a second?
Right.
Yes.
Discuss more what we're voting on.
You're voting on two-way communication, meaning that the public would be allowed to access our meetings from home, just like we did during Zoom, only it would be for our boards, so that they would be able to comment on public comments and be able to hear. Now, if someone wanted to monitor that, that's another issue that we certainly can get into. All I'm asking for is, do you support two-way communication or don't you?
Yeah.
And that's really all this is. And again, the two-way has to do with whether you want your constituents to have access to your board of trustee meetings, your public comments. They could be handicapped, they could be ill, they could have surgery, being ill. They could be home in their pajamas and not wanting to come, but wanting to be able to follow. We had quite a following with the Zoom. And now that's been a year since we've been here. So all I'm asking is, do you support two-way communication?
I do, so I'll second it.
Okay, thank you.
Make a question.
Please,
Is there a cost associated with it?
the cost.
Yeah,
So
budget?
you'd put a budget price on it? You know, that's a very good question. I'm assuming, as Taylor has been doing her research with regards to what this room is going to have video or what we're going to be doing for being able to hear us, there's always a cost with everything. So your answer is yes.
What is it?
The cost for two-way communication?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Wait, I
All
thought
I'm
we were
saying
just
is, do you
voting on
support it or
the-
don't you?
Yeah,
That's all it is.
there's no
That's-
cost.
There's no
in terms
cost
of
at this
supporting
point. That's something that can be checked into
You're
later on.
supporting something you don't know what's gonna cost?
it. No, there isn't a specific request for any action. It's whether or not we vote in support of two-way communication.
So what's the action item?
The action is yes, you do, no, you don't.
No, I get what the vote is. What is our staff going to do with this vote?
Nothing.
There isn't anything to
Then
do.
why
So
do
this
we
is just
vote?
a spiritual vote?
No, this is saying because we've been out of communication with people for a year.
No, Marie, I understand the underlying base. I'm asking what this vote means.
This
If
vote
no
means
action
that
is
you-
going to take
This
place,
vote means.
that doesn't
this
make
time-
sense.
No, this time, because Taylor was the one who said they have the capability. So all I'm saying is, if you support two-way communication, then it's something that we can look into. If you don't support it, there's no sense in looking into it.
So we're voting to look into something?
You're voting to say, yes, I support two-way communication. No, I do not support two-way communication.
And then what happens based on that vote?
I don't know what happens when you do votes. Any other time, are you trying to say the next step? All I want is the first step. The next step is not even on the agenda yet.
Well, this seems half-baked, so I'm going to be a no vote, because I'm not sure you know where
No,
this is
I know
headed.
exactly where this is going. but
Could you
that's
share it
okay.
then?
Yes. because
Okay.
If you don't.
What happens if we vote yes?
Well, I hope what happens down the road, because it's been a whole year, I would hope down the road you would accept the fact that when Taylor gets done with her investigation, that they have capabilities of two-way communication, then you'll accept that.
So we're voting to accept something?
You're voting to just let the community know that yes, you do support it, or no, you don't.
So it is a spiritual vote. There's no action that's actually coming from this.
There will be an action down the road, yes.
That we will vote on
It's been
again?
a whole year since.
Will we
we've
vote on the
done-
action again later?
Sure.
So why don't we wait until we have all the information and vote on it together?
Because it's been a whole year since you've done anything at all. And it's always kicking the can down the road. This time it says, yes, I do support two-way, so when and if there is a process or an ability to do so, we will then engage in two-way communication, because we support that. We support our community in being able to accept. Hey,
You never let anything like this fly before him, but now that you're in support of it, you're in support of it. That's cute.
I'm not sure I understand that statement, but all I need is just a vote.
All right.
Yep,
Ms. Howe?
because it was seconded by Jason. Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
No.
Mr. Benzi?
No.
Mr. Almarigi?
I do support two-way communication.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
No.
Mr. Rosecrans?
No.
Ms. Butler Challenger, no.
It's okay, let it go. All right, so we're on we're on B still, items for action. Well, that's a no vote, so it doesn't pass. Okay. That sends a very strong message. Competitive review process authorizing permitting adult use marijuana.
Thank you, Supervisor Howe. Last time we were here, at our last meeting, we went over the competitive review process for authorizing and permitting the adult use marijuana establishments. I don't know if there are any additional questions at this time. Chris Patterson was here last time to go over. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. If not, my recommendation is to adopt the procedures.
Is there a second?
There's not a first.
She just said it.
She doesn't get to make motions. We do. You can smirk at me all you want, Marie. No one's made a motion.
Then I suggest if that's what you think, then the motion be made.
Do you think a motion has been made?
Yes, I do, but that's.
Who made it?
You, God, I wish I were.
I will make the motion
Okay,
to
thank you.
approve.
Nice
the
bailout.
Review process.
Second.
You guys gonna arm wrestle?
Mr. Rosecrans?
I got a question. before we-
sorry.
I'm sorry.
No.
We're on C. We're on,
Correct, we're
We're on-
on what
Well,
was
actually, you're on
stated.
D.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was the competitive review process for authorizing and permitting adult use marijuana establishments.
okay, yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
All right, we're on B, item for action, that would be E. Second reading and adoption of the ordinance.
I move to accept ordinance 68.2 for the second reading and
Second.
adoption.
Second.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
No.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we are on BF as in Frank. This is the second reading for ordinance 68.3. Amending the ordinance authorizing and permitting adult use marijuana.
Move to accept ordinance 68.3, second reading and adoption.
I'll second.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecamp?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Bensy?
Yes.
Okay. We are still on items for action. This would be G, second reading and adoption of the 31.77 that establishes the commercial sale and overlay.
I move to accept ordinance 31.77 for second reading and adoption.
Second.
Mr. Bensy?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is Metro Act.
Two meetings,
H.
oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Yep.
no, go ahead.
Two meetings ago, I brought you this application by US Signal Company, and this would, if you approve it, approve the Metro Act bilateral application and allow me to execute the permit.
Do I have a second?
I'll do the first.
Well, all I'm saying is, are you going to second the motion?
I'll do the first of
Do the first
motion.
motion.
I'll second it for you.
Who was the first? Jason?
I was.
Jason, that was the first.
You're welcome.
The idiot is, okay. Is there discussion?
Did you just call him an idiot?
No, I said I'm,
Oh, okay.
do you have a discussion?
No, I agree.
Okay. Because I have a discussion.
Okay.
I have a question. This one, as I read through this, as you can see, one of the things that I wasn't real clear of, and maybe you can help me or Jason can help me, somebody can see it, but there seems to be an issue of broadband that this group, this is what I'm trying to understand. This group apparently goes into the community and does overheads unless they can't get to it, and then they do in the ground.
No,
So that's what I'm trying to understand.
So the Metro Act is, it's a state mandated template for internet service providers to receive a permit, to apply for and receive a permit. There is interest, or there might be interest in assessing the extent to which we have current permits for all fiber or internet facilities in our township. I'm of the opinion that not all facilities are actually permitted, which I think is an important thing to have an understanding of as we move forward as a township and a county when it comes to broadband improvements. This particular application is kosher in as much as they have sought approval using the correct form. And so I think it's, there isn't much discussion for us to have with this particular US Signal. In terms of what they're committing, it's also a small segment of their line. But I do think that there's future investigation and discussion on other entities that may or may not have been permitted.
You read the contract?
Yes.
Okay. Then in reading the contract, let me make sure I'm understanding this. We're giving permission for Bath, not, or the road commission is giving for Clinton County, because we own no roads, so we own no right of way. But we're signing a contract because we are the municipality that says it's okay to do that. Is that correct?
There's a second permitting process with
Okay.
the road commission. This is purely in terms of Bath's stake in the public right of way, which is not
Okay.
solely owned by the road commission. It's both.
Not so we own. Who owns the right of way?
So it depends on the particular road, and I'll defer to Alan here in terms of, and Joe, in terms of which roads are, on right-of-ways are owned by the county versus the township versus the state.
The county takes as much as they want and as little as they want. The road, the trees that are in the right-of-way, they want nothing to do with them unless they want them out of there. And so it ends up being we have a lot of 12, 15-foot road right-of-ways in the township.
So we do own right-of-ways.
That is what the area that they're in, like the one I'm in, over there in Park Lake. We have 15-foot right-of-ways, and we have 12-foot right-of-ways.
So we do own right-of-ways. That township does.
We own them, the county takes care of them
With our funds.
with our funds.
So okay, because that was one of the things that, when I read through this, I was reading, and all the time I'm thinking, we don't own roads, but they're talking about right-of-ways.
The road
So
is,
that-
the road is owned, Clark Road, Upton Road, Park Lake Road. County has Webster Road here. That is the county's jurisdiction on taking care of them. The rest of them we have to take care of.
Well, taking care of and owning them are two different.
I think under 1.7, on the first page of their
Yes.
application, it does say, shall public right-of-way shall mean the area on, below, or above a public roadway, highway, street, alley, easement, or waterway,
Correct.
to the extent municipality has the ability to grant the rights set forth herein.
That's exactly what I read, obviously.
But we're the
So-
first step of this process, so if we say yes, then they're gonna move on with their second application to.
And the road commission, that's okay, that's, and the other thing when I was reading through this was that they're going to trim your trees, they being Metro, not the road commission or anybody else, it's Metro that will take care of trimming trees, because they're gonna be using our telephone poles. This is why I put in the broadband thing.
Yeah, no, so I want to, I appreciate your bringing this up for discussion and asking questions. I think as a township, our understanding of how and, our rights and responsibilities related to the telecommunications and broadband infrastructure, we lack a good understanding of what those rights and responsibilities are. And so I don't think this particular permitting process for this particular applicant is the correct place to have that discussion, but I would encourage the township and this board to think, to take seriously that this is an important issue when it comes to our efforts to improve broadband and telecommunications for our residents.
I wish I could agree with you that it's not an important piece or that discussion should take place. I appreciate that. But I don't know where else this discussion takes place with this contract. That's what I'm not understanding. And I think at one point, please help me out with this, is there a revenue that we get from this?
From the state, yes.
Okay, from the state, and that's, do we know how much that is?
Very.
Please,
maybe
no,
I'm
you're
supposed to
more
talk about
familiar with how that's calculated than I am.
This thing started,
You're the
back in
treasurer.
2003, you signed a bilateral assumption agreement with, your attorney handled it for, as I said once before, for many different municipalities in the area that you represented. And it allowed us to start collecting revenues for this purpose. The difference between what you signed then and what you're asking for here is the word bilateral. And the bilateral part of that is the permit process, and you're getting a piece of it. Now they have to take, just as they did with the rest of the Metro Act type stuff, the franchise fees and everything else, they have to take and pay you for the use of your space in your township and by ordinance, because you signed up for this back in 2003, and it's a revenue that you see that's in your revenue line items in the general fund, and they pay you for this. And it could range anywhere from $2,000, I think the last one we got in, I may be wrong, might have been like $1,300 about a month ago. And,
I think total we get about 13,000, 14,000.
that is correct. And so this is a revenue source of what was available out there, and the people at the legislature said, hey, if you sign up for this and do this right, and you put your township on the list for receiving these payments will come to the township when they have to buy these permits. This is a tax on these people who if you want, that's the way I look at it. It's a tax on people who want to take and promote their whatever type of
So what do they do?
stuff they do. What do they do with what?
What do
They're putting.
do to pay us 13,000 a
They
year?
send us a check.
I know, but what do they do besides write a check? There has to be something they do.
And doing that, because we signed up in 2003 to be on this list, we qualified ourselves as a community to be receiving of these funds to help run our government, and pay your salary, and anybody else's salary that has to be
That's
paid.
all I'm asking.
We
I'm
basically
asking
said we
what
would
do-
apply to have infrastructure in our right of ways.
That's
Okay,
correct.
so the infrastructure, go ahead.
All I'll say is there's miles of unpermitted infrastructure that are not being paid for. And if we want to get those payments, we should look into this. Pure and simple.
We're already getting payments, but we want to get the bilateral payments, which is different than what the contract was. That's what this is about.
Well, bilateral means two. You've got it.
That's why we would have
So-
one before we get another one.
So what you, so bilateral is payment.
I would say that bilateral is a new term, is what they're using, and they have to have a permit. It says right there, if you
Yes.
read it, it says bilateral
I've read
permit.
it.
And then,
Okay.
and before they didn't have to have that with whatever type of Metro Act money we got, where with broadband being a big player today, as Jason just pointed out,
Right.
I think that probably would include that as well. If you look at a lot of your rural general law townships and your rural areas, there's where the miles and miles of unpermitted stuff is taking place, from what my knowledge of this, talking to other rural treasurers, where we jump to the forefront, being a more modern day charter township back years ago, and our attorney advised us that we needed to take and sign up for this, so we use this revenue stream to help run our government.
But what do they do for us?
They provide service, internet service,
Okay.
in this particular case, to the residents.
Like
Okay,
a-
so
like
it's
a
called
building.
Metro
It's
as a service,
It's like
as a
a
provider.
building permit. It's
So-
no different than a permit.
So what I'll say is, the other thing I'll say is that Everstream just laid a bunch of fiber and they got shut down because of the mess that they made. We are not able to produce a Metro Act permit for the line that they just put in. They have one permit from 2018.
Yes, every
It's a small
15 years,
segment of
and-
like 100 yards on
Yeah.
drone power. And so, again, it's up to the pleasure of the board to follow up on this. And so,
So basically, they laid fiber optics for another provider to come in and use.
so that they're a business-only provider, and they had a third-party contractor or fourth-party contractor or whatever,
Okay.
who actually laid the line. But my understanding is that that work was not permitted for the Metro Act.
No, I was just trying to figure out what they do. So Metro lays fiber.
No, Metro's the name of the permitting process through the states. Everstream is the provider. It's just one example. Everstream is an internet service provider. They're a business-only provider. They hired a third-party contractor to either bury the line in directional boring, or they laid it on telephone poles if those poles
Would, yeah.
could handle the fiber. And then what will happen once the line is up and operational is that they will provide services to businesses. They'll probably subcontract to residential service providers, provide residential fiber to the homes along Slate and Webster and Drumheller and Watson. So there's a win-win there. And then, I think the balance is having an understanding of how do we eliminate barriers to building out the infrastructure, but while also protecting our rights and our revenue sources?
Okay.
Jason, if I'm not mistaken, it was Metro Republic Act.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
That's the public act, it
Right.
creates the language legislature.
I just didn't know what they did. That was, what it was they were supposed to provide. If we're doing broadband and we're looking at the county, is this a problem? In other words, I can go halfway up Webster, but I can't go full way because that's already been laid. Right? So is that,
No,
that's what okay. No.
The Metro Act provides a pretty structured template
Yes.
to eliminate municipalities' ability to line item veto elements or to overcharge providers or provide. It's just, it provides a structure. And so it depends on what the nature of the work is. So Everstream, like I said, provides business only, but they can subcontract out. They may offer some strands for security, so property alarms and the like. They may do other things like 911 communications. I don't know if that's the case or not. I don't know.
No, I get it.
They may also provide telephone services digitally, or they may provide television. It all depends on what the nature of the provider is, but
Yeah.
this all falls under
But
this.
the provider has to follow the Metro Act.
Yes.
Okay, that's part of, as I read it, it became more, okay,
Okay.
finally, yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Fuentes?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes. Shouldn't ask any questions, I'd be able to find myself. Okay. We have a resolution. It's on the back side. Resolution to adopt 21-26 contemporary plan. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So as this board voted back in April, this proposed plan was sent to adjacent municipalities, the county, the state regional planning agency, and we had a period of 42 days to receive comments. We only received comments from the Clinton County Drain Commission and Meridian Township. The 4 changes that were made are listed here in this memo. Apart from those 4 changes, this document is exactly the same as you saw it a few months ago. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the changes if you have any.
My question had to do, if I'm understanding correctly. This product that's been produced wasn't on the website, and I'm assuming part of that's because we hadn't passed it. But it also speaks to the fact that there's supposed to be input from the community. So I guess my why is it was not on the internet as a draft.
It has been on the website as a draft since probably February.
Oh,
Yes, under the planning section.
okay, then I got wrong. I didn't go, I did get one off, but it was like, our first one, our township from 2019 to 24 was 18 pages. From our 21 to 26.
You're looking at the capital improvement plan.
These are the capital
Yeah.
improvement pieces, which are part of this comprehensive plan. And that's what I'm trying to understand, because it's 62 pages now. We were on the planning commission, so.
Yeah, so the capital improvement plan is a tool of the comprehensive plan. So there's separate documents and separate processes.
Yes.
But to your question in terms of community feedback, there was some back in 2019 when the process
Yes.
initiated, and
I
then
remember that.
there were probably 1,500 meetings. And Brian,
Probably.
Not quite
our
that.
planner Miles would be able to speak more to that. So I've voiced my opinions about that
Yeah.
process in the past.
And I've talked to Miles a number of different times. One of my issues, and Miles understands that, or at least he accepts it, whether he understands it or not, has to do with master plan being comprehensive in this plan. The master plan deals solely with land, nothing else. Well, it does, yes it does. The master plan is solely for land development.
No.
Okay. I'll disagree with you respectfully, but in saying that, to bring it into a comprehensive, it kind of gets lost as to how things are done. I mean, when you compare 62 pages to, well, and again, these are CYPs. So when you compare them, it's a little tough to start looking through it without saying, so we have one plan, if I'm understanding what Miles is trying to do, which I think I understand it, is to bring everything together so that you have one document, as opposed to 3 different documents. Is that correct?
No.
No.
Okay.
I didn't start this process. The process started in 2019.
Okay. Well, however,
So
am
I
so-
was part of the process, starting the process. So were you, Joe? Were you on that planning commission in 2019?
I've been involved in every one of these. We
The comprehensive plan and the master plan are two terms for the same thing. And so if you look at the actual goals, what you'll see is both a combination of land use as well as, land use can be very encompassing of programs and services. So perhaps, while technically the case, I would argue that it's better to describe the comprehensive plan as a set of future direction goals that should drive decision-making on how we allocate funds, how we provide services, how we promote growth, how we want our community to look in the future, both short-term, intermediate-term, and long-term. And so this should be, in terms of the goals, objectives, and actions, as you can see starting on page 17, this document should drive how when we go into the budget planning process, we should be referencing this on a regular basis. And so things like Objective 4 of Goal 1, Action 3, support community gardens by providing space and resources. So the resources piece is above and beyond how we the land use. And so it's a question of what might those resources be? Might they be funding? Might they be FTE of a position? Might they be an incentive program? And that all has to, it's intended to be not fully structured down to the actual set of actions, so that it supports creativity and it creates flexibility for how we live into this over the next 5 years.
Great. I get that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the 21-26 comprehensive plan.
Support.
Okay.
Ms. Howe?
No. I'm still struggling with it.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes-Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes.
And so that's adopted. You will, Miles. We're good. Okay. Resolution to return surplus funds to Lansing Community College. Treasurer Wisswasser.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you want me to do this, okay. Resolution to return surplus funds to Lansing
You don't have
Community
to,
College
do it.
as a result of the dissolution of the Downtown Development Authority back in 2021, June 21st. The passed ordinance number 63.2, which allows the dissolution of the DDA. The amount of money that has to be returned to Lansing Community College is the amount that they received a spreadsheet that went along with this and shows what the total collection was in 2000, I believe, 15 through 2019, or through 2021, excuse me. for the total amount of what was collected, and it had to be prorated out in accordance to what their prorated share was, in accordance to what the information on the resolution is 125.421, section 2, surplus funds of downtown development authority for Bath Charter Township, which shall revert proportionately to the respective taxing bodies. There's only two taxing bodies in the DDA, one of it being Bath Charter Township and one of it being Lansing Community College. Lansing Community College is outlined in the audit on page 64, and is represented as community and economic development. That's what the auditor and Department of Treasury determined. That's what the chart of accounts for what the basis would be for returning them funds to them. You instructed me earlier after the audit, we talked about this, about contacting Lansing Community College, which I did. I contacted their comptroller and requested if we could take and retain these funds, their share in Bath Township, if they were interested in donating them to Bath Township to the DDA and put them with the rest of the committed funds, or maybe the possibility of scholarship money towards residents in Bath Township that wanted to participate in something at LCC. They got with their chairman of their finance board, they got back with me in an email a couple days later, and they indicated that they wanted their money back. So they want their $100,145 to be returned to them. We draw it up, the superintendent brought up an ordinance with the appropriate information on here, where it needs to go, and by law, we are required to take and return their $100,145 to them. And this money will come from the committed funds of the DDA, which is what the funds are in the audit, and it actually shows it in the audit on page 64, the $100,145. The amount of money that will be remaining in committed funds to the DDA, it has to be spent in the DDA district, will be $174,723. I would move, I guess I'll make the motion. I'll make the motion to move to adopt the resolution to return surplus funds to Lansing Community College and resolve the exclusion of the downtown development authority.
Support.
I have a question or discussion. I want to make sure I'm understanding. What this resolution is saying is that we dissolved the downtown development authority. The district doesn't exist or does exist?
District does exist.
Okay, so this is just saying the authority itself has been
The
dissolved.
board has been dissolved.
No, I understand that, but the district is still there.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
It no longer captures
Texas, the
revenue.
TIF, yes. But when I read the first part, it was that it dissolved the downtown development authority. Then what that says is the TIF was dissolved, but the district is still there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Along with the bank account and the money
Yes.
and the committed funds, is their share is LCC share, as well as the Charter Township of Bath DDA district share.
Yes,
This is a separate fund, it's separate from the general fund, and it's separate money.
no, that's all I needed to know was that the district is still there, but the TIF is gone.
Correct.
Okay. Did we get a second?
Ryan.
Oh, okay,
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes-Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosegrants?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the resolution passes. Yep, unanimously, it passes, so that's pretty good. So now we have the community board and commission draft for their policy. And again, this is a vote up or a vote down, it's very simple. So do I have a motion? You understand what I mean?
I have a comment.
Please.
I like what you've put together here. Where I am less supportive is paying for folks to stay in a meeting where there's not a quorum, paying half. I don't think we should promote folks meeting when there isn't a quorum, and I don't think we should compensate them in that way. But I support the rest of it.
Actually, I didn't have that, I did it with me, so that was part of,
The Witter Water.
you want to do it, you actually did that. But anyway, is there any other discussion? Okay, we need to vote. Oh, you got a motion? Did you make the motion, Ryan, or was yours just a, okay. Okay, no motion, so it dies. And so I guess you guys will have to figure out the next step. You know, the policy, dealing with committees. So you'll have to think on that and let me know what direction you want to go in. Okay. Next, hang on. The senior advisory, this ought to be a good one. Okay, what this is asking, and we did get the application, Judy spoke to it, still here. Very good. And what that had to do with was whether or not, let me see if I can find it. Well, this has been quite a meeting. Basically, what staff had said with that had to do with the numbers, the expansion for the township or for our senior center, is whether or not we want to go ahead as a board and spend a little over $5,000, which again the CIP doesn't. They require, I think, $20,000 is what they require. So this is basically supposed to allow the senior center to make a determination as to whether or not this is something they want to do. So they're asking for a consultant, basically, to be brought in. And they're asking $5,000 for the township to put in. Now, we've given, and I've said this to staff, we're going to talk about it just briefly. We put the $20,000 in for broadband to do it. Other committees, I'm sure, have been asking for consultants, to do it. Our Park and Rec's budget, I didn't bring mine, had to do with, what, $177,000 is what we passed in our budget.
I don't have a budget, that's the audit.
I know, but it tells you what's there. And that's a little good piece, people should read it. And so from that, I'm saying that the money is there. We do have, but if that's not something that you want to do, then that's something that I think you actually, from what comments are being made from Karen, from our staff, saying that, and it shows here, she's looking at this average meal attendance. I'm not sure that has a whole lot to do with what it is that we're looking at for a senior. I think we're looking for growth, and we're looking for access to be able to do things with our seniors that we haven't been able to do. And the expansion would certainly help with that. But I can tell from the looks, there isn't much support there for the senior expansion.
There wasn't information in the packet.
No, there's not, because that's something, what information would you be looking for? Because that's what they're looking for.
Well, what is the consultant going to do?
What the consultant would do is like any other consultant, which you're very aware of, they facilitate what happens and what the discussion is as to what's needed. They have to decide from their point of view what it is they want to do. If they want to go to an engineer to be able to say, then they can come to the CIP and say, okay, this is what it's going to cost, this is what we're going to need. No, go ahead.
So is the consultant going to be hired to facilitate the development of a strategic plan or the development of engineering plans for a new facility?
I think all of that. I think that's what a consultant does. They'll come in and facilitate what it is the advisory board feels that they need, and what the cost is gonna be, who's gonna be there, how it's gonna, that's what a facilitator will end up doing, is kind of take these questions that they'll have, which of course we'll have staff there, so we'll definitely have questions, you know, to do. But all I'm looking at this point is the fact that they're asking for the dollars to be able to do it. They can't go to the CIP. Well, they shouldn't go to the CIP without being able to say, this is what we need, we want to expand it, and this is how much it's going to cost us to expand. Plus, they're looking for grant money, which is exactly what happens.
May I ask questions of
Sure.
a audience member?
Oh, sure. 'Cause
Ms.
that'll help.
Carey, would you be willing to explain what you're looking for?
What's the question, Jason?
I'm not quite clear about the nature of what the request is. I was hoping that you could explain
Right.
what the vision and goals are.
As I stated at the beginning of the meeting, one of the goals of the strategic plan for the senior center is to expand the senior center. So in looking at that question and moving that goal forward, in order to determine whether or not we actually need an expanded senior center, which is the first question, I think there's data that we need to look at. There are questions that I feel are important to ask of you and the community. I think we need a conversation about an expanded senior center, not just a building, but programs and services as our population continues to grow. And then in looking at the physical building, if we were to expand, would we go, how would that expansion, what would that expansion look like? And in order to answer that kind of a technical question, we actually need an architect or an engineer who would provide us with the drawings, the cost estimates, the materials, and that will give us the information that we need in order to, one, make the determination should the senior center be expanded, two, what would that cost and where would we get the money, and it gives us an opportunity to have actual documentation that we could take in the grant writing process to someone like the Capital Region Community Foundation or Homeland Security or the Bath Planning Board, who is always asking for more technical information than we as volunteers can provide to actually support the request for what could be, $200,000. That's a large capital expenditure. And as volunteers from the community, we're asking the Township Board to support us in looking at this question and bringing the resources to the table that allows us to give you the answers that you need in moving forward. That might not just involve an architect or an engineer, but it might be a professional facilitator who brings us the opportunity to have a good community conversation about this. On September 20th, we're inviting a lot of seniors, all the seniors that we can identify in the township who are registered voters, is that right, to the senior center for lunch. We need to see what the demand is outside the 85 to 110 regular patrons that we have for our services. And this is a way that we feel we can help you move forward. And we don't feel that should all rest on our responsibility, on our shoulders, because we don't have the resources to bring you the technical answers that you need.
Okay, thank you. I have a better understanding. So I'd like to make a motion. It's going to be a little bit different than what's presented. I move that the township allocate $20,000 to senior center planning for hiring of two consultants. One would be a community facilitator to support the process of engaging the community, and then the other would be an architectural firm to assess the building for its space and where there might be areas for expansion if needed.
I'll second it.
I have a question. As usual, the 20,000 was for survey?
No, no, no.
Okay.
So up to 20,000 for the hiring of consultants
You
to
want two.
support the I don't think an architectural firm is going to be able to engage
No, it's not.
community in a
Okay.
conversation about programs and services. I think that might likely be a separate facilitator. I don't think $5,000 is remotely sufficient to cover the cost for having a professional plan that to support the development of a high-quality professional plan. Of all the things that we have been discussing, I think taking seriously the planning process is critically important, and this is an opportunity to support one arm of our township in doing that well.
And I certainly would agree with that. The only thing that I'm sorry you misunderstood that an engineer would be a facilitator, that's not the case. But
I
the motion's on the
assumed that
table.
was not the case.
So, God, I hope so. That's what I said, I'm sorry. That's, the engineer just, no. Go ahead.
I haven't heard any board members talk about this as a priority, and we're about to enter our budgeting session or time frame in about 6 weeks from now. We'll have the recommendation from the superintendent. It makes more sense to me to look at this through the lens of what are our priorities in the budget process. It's the tail end of the budget year. It doesn't make sense to me to add funds at this point for something else when we're about to enter into that process.
So your thought is we don't have the funds to do it?
No, my thought is we should put it into a process where it competes against all of the other priorities that we have.
The senior advisory has worked over 10 years, as is stated here. And they are at a point where they have like 30,000. What they need is 50 to be able to compete for their funds, which is exactly part of the process we're talking about with broadband.
They're competing for
So
funds
They
from
will-
whom?
They will be with your community, community,
They have to raise $50,000 to compete for funds?
to be able to
I think
demonstrate that they have.
Similar to the last process when we
Right.
received a grant from the Capital Area Community.
Capital area, thank you.
Community Foundation. I think you were instrumental in that process.
Yes, he was.
He was,
Yeah.
that's why. But anyway, Al, your thoughts, you are on the board.
I'd like to see the study, because I think there's a lot of people that, like Judy says, by the time you get to the amount of people that are coming there that are too many for the building, it's too late to enlarge it, because then you're driving people away.
Okay, so the motion, oh, sorry.
I've got no problem
No
with,
discussion.
with the study. Only thing I have a question on is, we danced around this. You haven't really told us where you're gonna take this money from. You have lots of possibilities. The motion was to take $20,000, to spend $20,000. They didn't say we were gonna amend what budget you were gonna amend. They didn't say what line item you were gonna use or what fund you were gonna take it out of. I'm guessing since you got $30,318 on page 44 of the audit for the senior center fund balance, left over from last year, that you're gonna amend this out of the senior center fund balance to take and pay for this, which would leave you with $10,318, and that's also have to look at it.
Yeah.
I would actually argue that we should take it out of ARPA funds.
It's actually $518, excuse me, I was off a little bit.
And I would go back to Park and Recreation, which doesn't exist anymore, that we allocated X amount of dollars for them, and that hasn't been used at this point, to the best of my knowledge, so.
You can take it anywhere you want, I just need to know how you wanna do this, and then you gotta do another motion, and later, I guess you can do it the next meeting. You can put together the resolution amending
Right, we have to amend it.
your budget to take it and appropriate it, to do it right, but you haven't really determined how, where you're gonna pay for that. I got the problem with the study,
Okay.
I agree, I think it's important, I don't know, it could be better times for it, but if it was taken out of the senior center money, then it wouldn't matter, it's their money to begin with, so it's being used in their fund. But if you're taking it out of another fund, you need to
need a resolution.
Either way, you need to have a resolution amending the budget to do this. You can't take money out of fund balance without amending the budget.
Well, I don't know, take out fund balance. Is that where we put Park and Recs, this fund balance?
I'm talking about the senior center.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying if you rob Peter to pay Paul, that's part of what you do. If you have,
I don't rob anybody, I don't know Peter Paul, so I can't really comment on that, but here's the thing, you either gotta take it out of the, you gotta figure out what fund you wanna take this out of, and you need to have a resolution regarding that, and that's what you gotta do here, and I heard another comment saying we gotta take it, trustee Bliss talked about, we're close to the end of the year for budgeting purposes, yeah, we are for the general fund, and then I suppose we are for the senior center fund as well, but I mean, we do have a fund balance in the senior, I'm just throwing this out here, I'm assuming you wanna do this out of the senior center fund balance, you can take it out of the general fund, you can take it out of, as trustee Almerici says, out of the ARPA funds, you haven't spent any money out of that. I believe that falls within one of the 4 bucket list items that you can take money from. But you need to take, and you just can't say we're gonna spend $20,000, because we have a lot of different funds, we have $20,000 in, and the treasurer really needs to know where you're gonna take the money from.
and yes, he does.
And Peter and Paul don't play into it.
All right,
I have a question.
yes.
Obviously, we're not quite ready to do this, okay? We're just not quite ready to do this.
See.
It's painfully obvious that we're not quite ready to do this.
Well, I'm sorry it's painfully obvious, because it's painfully obvious to me that it should be done.
Okay,
And
let's
that
vote.
the dollars, let's
Let's
do
vote.
vote.
Have
That's-
the superintendent
that's-
bring back a motion, tell me where you're gonna do it.
I would have to bring back a budget amendment for you. I mean, if you support the concept, I can bring back a budget amendment at the next meeting for you to move the money. Approve the money.
Well, it have to be, but the fund balance that they have for the senior services, I think they work very hard for, with pennies that they keep adding up, are to be used the same way that we use the broadband,
That's their
able to say
fundraising
that
money.
we have X amount of dollars, so we're looking for a 50-50 match.
I think that, but I think to your point, that's their fundraising money. That's the money they've,
Right.
that I spoke to it in my memo. They've raised $30,518, and you said it was an audit.
Oh, well, whatever was in the audit for that.
So
But,
I'm gonna amend my motion.
okay,
So my motion is to, for the board to allocate up to $20,000 of ARPA funding to support the planning process for the senior center. This is under the assumption that their fund balance is probably planned for programs and services for our seniors.
I'll second that. The amendment.
Okay, up to $20,000 ARPA funds to support senior center to, I didn't get,
To support a planning process for potential expansion of facilities and programs and services to be used for the hiring of consultants and support of community engagement processes.
so it's earmarked for specific, but that's still a little, it's up.
I think, you want more detail? I'll throw more detail.
No, I'm saying that that's gonna be, that will work for me. Yep.
Mr. Bensi?
No,
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes-Bliss?
No.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes,
Mr. Westfalter?
Yes.
Thank you.
all right, so that gives us, what, 2, it passed, but it's 2-5? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay. Now we're on new business B, items for action, introduction and first reading of your ordinance 31.79. And Miles, sorry, I didn't even see, I thought you left.
no.
Thank goodness. We're done.
So tonight, what the board has in front of you is an ordinance to amend the section that covers lot coverage and the percentages on how those are currently calculated, and also to amend the introduction of green space requirements. So what the planning commission is attempting to do with amending this ordinance is there's been several developments that have come to the township where how lot coverage is currently defined. Only structures are included in our lot coverage calculations, so actual building itself. What's not included in that calculation is things like parking lots, driveways, sidewalks, so impermeable surfaces that water cannot penetrate, thus creating the need for more retention ponds, creating excess runoff. As I hope everyone in this room is aware, Bath Township's a pretty wet place. So it was actually kind of interesting, the research for this ordinance language. When we looked at how to define lot coverage, there was kind of two ends of the spectrum, from having a very inclusive definition of the word lot coverage to having a less inclusive. So only some structures meet lot coverage, all the way to very inclusive, which is driveways, parking lots, that's all. And it seemed like the areas in the U.S. that had a more comprehensive definition of lot coverage just happened to be areas in the northwestern portions of America, the East Coast, Mississippi Valley, so places that were also quite wet. And that's likely because, you're driving down Drumheller, you're looking at, a lot of these properties on the left and right side of the road. In the springtime, they're quite flooded. There's nowhere for the water to go. We have a high amount of clay within our sediment. So that becomes an issue when developers come in, because they will build to spec. So if the lot coverage is 40%, they're gonna fit as many apartments, houses, townhomes, or whatever they can on that piece of property, because obviously that's their incentive, is to make money. Now, with the leftover space, they'll do the parking lot and drives whichever way they see fit. What the Planning Commission, myself, are attempting to do with this current structure, or this current regulatory framework, is not prohibit developers from coming. Obviously, we want to see development in the township. Obviously, we don't want to create a large amount of legal nonconformities, so we don't want to take a bunch of properties that are currently good to go and make them, in conflict with the ordinance. But what we also want to do is encourage developers to think about how they're orientating their parking lots and driveways, and account for the fact that, hey, they're creating a lot of impervious surface. And that's what this more broad definition of lot coverage attempts to do. Because we are broadening out the definition of lot coverage, we have to account for the fact that our old percentages, so like in the D development district, it is 40% lot coverage on a parcel. Now that we're including parking lots, driveways, 40% would no longer make a lot of parcels financially, it wouldn't financially make sense to develop those at 40%. So we had to up those calculations. So those have been adjusted. What we did to get those figures was we went through and randomly sampled each of the zoning districts in Bath Township and used GIS to determine what the average lot coverage ratio typically is in those districts given the new framework. And then we also added language in there about green space requirements. This is trying to signal to professional developers who typically are very astute at diving into these ordinances, reading through them, trying to figure out what the municipality wants to see, because they likely want to bring a project that they think the Planning Commission is going to support. They're trying to get this to market as quick as possible. So putting language in the ordinance about green space minimums kind of signals to the developer that this is a priority in the community. So we're hoping to strike kind of that balance in Bath Township between encouraging growth but encouraging it in the places it needs to be and sustainably. So I know that was a lot kind of there, but does anybody have any questions about the specifics?
I have issues with D4. So these are the yard and setback requirements for the rural districts. D4 says, in the indication of permanent or temporary structure housing livestock or for storage of manure shall be located any closer than 100 feet to a lot line. This would...
Page 3.
I'm sorry?
Page 3.
Yeah, section 5.05.
Yeah.
I just worry that that's, I will eliminate the possibility of a use by right for some of those parcels that are 2 acres or under 5 acres.
I'm sorry, if I don't understand, is that currently the?
So you have a separate
Yes.
ordinance for land use in the rural district that has use by right, which does include maintaining varieties of livestock.
Okay.
And so there are parcels that are 2 acres in the rural districts where there are livestock operations. These are typically smaller livestock operations for farmstead use, whatever. I worry that this is prohibitive against uses of property in the form of, how do I say this, creating one's own food for one's family. And if I remember correctly, the comprehensive plan that we just approved prioritizes those types of uses.
Yeah, I think that is good language called. That is not language that we adjusted here with these amendments at all. So we're focusing on lot coverage and green space. So that language that you're talking about is currently in the ordinance, and we didn't think. Now, I
would support this with striking of that particular limitation.
Yeah, I do agree that there could be some conflict there.
But even if we don't pass this, that still is the ordinance.
Yeah, that would be in the ordinance regardless of whether this passes or not.
Yeah.
Miles, could you go? Oh, which one? I was gonna say,
Okay.
the two of you.
My question is, would Myers, in this new ordinance, would Myers have got their right of way to that property the way they built it?
Their current configuration will be fine. This ordinance won't preclude their current configuration.
With all of the parking lot they've got and all of the building and very little green space, you got less than 40%. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Oh, are you saying if they came through now?
If they come here now.
They would still be able to come through, because if you look at that parcel, like if, we were full of FetchJS and look at it, it's quite a large parcel. So even with the large facility and the large parking lot, the parcel itself is also quite large. I would just ballparking it, I would put their lot coverage under the new definition, somewhere around 65%. Just a ballpark estimate.
Because I would have guessed that.
I wouldn't have guessed it either.
Yeah, I was disproven several times. As I said, we went through and randomly sampled these. In my head, I kind of had a ballpark figure, and when we went through and did the sample, I was wildly off.
Okay.
Miles, get back to what Jason was talking about.
Yeah.
Trustee Elmer, please.
Thank you very much, Trustee Elmer, for correcting me, I think, correct. Apologize. Here you're talking about lots. Obviously, in the rural district, if somebody has a 40-acre parcel of ground, you can't enforce that. But it writes Farm Act.
Yep. Yeah, it's in conflict. That's why I said I could see some conflict there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The most cattle operations there is in the township, there's several, have their cattle grazing right next to people they lot, but they have 40 acres of land, so that makes them exempt from it.
Yeah.
That being said, they would be exempt from this. I'm not sure how a lot would be, but I would agree with you. I think you're discouraging what you're trying to promote by farmsteads and mini farms and whatnot, and so that, I agree with Jason on that, or trustee on the region. But the 40-acre right Farm Act will prohibit you from enforcing that rule on any livestock producer.
Fair.
In the township that has, and there's several that have lots next to them, and they choose to have their lots right next to people who have 40-acre farms, but that's, you can't zone them people out of business.
Absolutely.
A lot doesn't like that.
Yeah, just that wasn't something that we talked about through this amendment. It wasn't on our radar, but agreed.
So I will move, this is the first reading.
Yes.
So I move to accept the first reading of ordinance 31.79 with the following amendment. And that amendment is for section 5.05, item B4, that item being stricken, I guess. Stricken.
Take it out.
Yes.
Good, okay.
Yeah, sure.
My question has to do with your D3, that same page,
Okay.
where you're talking about your minimum green space requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Am I understanding, and help me with this one, because it's saying if you have a 4 acre parcel, that 50% of that needs to be green space?
Yeah.
So that's 2 acres of green space.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so that falls in line with exactly what you're saying. It's not so much the farmer as it is today for people who want to sustain themselves and feed their livestock and make their gardens and et cetera for their own health. How does that fall in? Because if you put a house on, this is like, I guess I'm trying to figure out. If it's 50%, that gives you 2 acres. If you put a house on an acre, that gives you an acre to do whatever it is that you want to do. An acre is a good size, but you're
Yeah.
building bigger houses today.
Building a 1 acre house.
Yeah. That's,
Who knows what big acre-
well, that's
what I'm saying.
Entire trustees, mostly.
Yeah.
well, that's where
Yeah,
I was.
he's full of it up to his ears. That's okay. So in doing that, and then you say 95% of every additional acre of land
Mhm.
within the parcel. So that verbiage means what? So I have 2 acres now because 2 is for green space.
Yep.
Okay,
So we did get a little bit complicated with the rural district just because there is a lot of farming out there, and we did want to think about our farmers, obviously, you know.
this has to, okay.
So 2 points on that. One, we randomly went through and surveyed, and then the rural district, I think we randomly surveyed something like 50 parcels. We tried to include farms. We tried to think about the orientation of your typical, you know, farming, home business, whatever you want to call it, layout of their site. Typically, they will have a house of a number of outbuildings, silos. We looked at those calculations, and then that 4 acres, we found not getting close to 2 acres worth. That'd be quite a large development.
Yeah.
But what we didn't want to do is something like 50% for, let's say, if a farmer did own 100 acres, let's say it's not, because in the Agriculture Act, obviously, it precludes us from doing some zoning, but let's say they try to do something interesting on their farm, like create it into a wedding venue space or agro-tourism or something like that. I think the intention in Bath Township is to keep the rural district rural. And so this ordinance tries to come up with a mechanism so on large farms, they couldn't build 100 acres to 50% capacity. I think that's a little bit more dense than maybe we want the northern part of the township to be able to sustain, or the community character. Now, with these current measurements, would we expect any conflict at all? No. We tested out, we looked at the numbers. No, I think everyone would be fine, even in an extreme scenario.
Where are hoop houses and greenhouses within this?
They would be covered as structures.
As structures?
Yep. Accessory structures.
Accessory, I was gonna say.
On
there's a
4
little-
acres of land, what would be the maximum size hoop house you could have?
You'd be able to cover 2 acres worth of that 4. But if you own, let's,
In the
Without
rural
anything
area?
else.
but let's say that you typically, large farming operation wouldn't have just 2 acres of land. Let's say they have 100 acres of land. So that's where this calculation comes from. So the first 4 acres, they would get 2 acres allotted, and then they would get 5% for the rest of the property.
I worry about that assumption because there are
Right.
quite a
It's an
few
assumption.
small parcel agricultural operations, one of which is operated by one of our committee members who is a chair of a recreation committee. So and who also does hoop houses. I worry that the nature of a hoop house is substantially different from a bricks and mortar building in terms of its impact on land and its purpose for what it's doing. And so I worry about that particular, I mean, agricultural operations on smaller parcels, because I don't think that we should disadvantage people who are on smaller parcels who want to do agricultural operations. Now, I'm assuming that there can be, exemptions to this, but,
Maybe if we had particular pieces of property that we think would run afoul of what's being put forward by the planning commission, Miles would be willing to run those numbers to show us if that would get caught up in these rules, or if, as he's arguing, those folks would be able to do what they're doing.
well, I think that, that's important as well as, might we be limiting, future uses?
Yes, I think that brings up a really good point, because we don't know what's gonna happen 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. So the farmer with 100 acres may sell it to a developer, and a developer then does an acre for each one, which is pretty big for a developer. They have those teeny tiny little by square feet kind of thing. So future use, I think, is really an important piece, because there's no way of knowing what's gonna happen.
Do you mean like dividing out and creating a planned unit development? Because
Yes.
then these setbacks wouldn't be in play, they would fall under the PUD language.
Okay,
But to Jason's point about the hoop houses, I think that's fair. Brian, I don't know what you think. Obviously, we talked about this a good bit at the planning commission. Always when you're writing these ordinances, you're trying to think of every possible scenario, and you're always trying to thread a needle between sustainable growth.
that's pretty
Exemption for hoop houses.
I think that's a change in the spirit of what was proposed and should go back to the planning commission.
Just to be sure, you're saying hoop, H,
O-O-P.
Yes,
Great.
and not coop. In the vast majority of cases, hoop houses and greenhouses are actual soil that's being farmed, as opposed to a concrete slab that is storing equipment or other things. That seems like a pretty obvious case, but there might be other situations in terms of agricultural uses, and maybe there can be a softening or exemptions for. Planning Commission has the ability to adjust any of the standards within based on presented agricultural uses, or I guess that would be a building department or.
I was gonna say, a farmer isn't gonna come to the planning
Yeah.
commission, so I was just trying to, try to think of a way to.
Like how to get them to be queued up to request that variance from standards.
And the other thing about the hoop houses is that their intent is to extend the growing season, right? And so, again, I would caution against, or I would encourage us to be more open in terms of thinking about supporting those activities.
So I guess, is your recommendation then to take this ordinance back to the planning commission and review your concerns?
It sounds like the board rep to the planning commission would prefer that.
Well, if you want to put it to a vote, go ahead. I just think it's fair to put new concerns back to the planning commission. We didn't discuss that. We didn't talk about that.
I have a question. Does anybody from the planning commission or your department or anybody actually go out and look at these agricultural facilities in our township?
We did take a sample, like I said online, I think we sampled somewhere around 30 to 50 in the rural area, and we found no conflicts with this ordinance. We don't go out and do site visits. We did in this case.
You did.
We did not in this case.
You did not.
We didn't do site visits, no. We used GIS to do our random surveys, aerial imagery.
I would suggest that you do some site visits and you look at some specific sites, because I'm tired, Michigan Farm Bureau will tell you, which I sat on the board of directors, Michigan Farm Bureau years ago, when this all started, the value added ag thing started, they referred to even to today as wedding barns, and anything else is, these barns or any hoop barns or anything on these properties, they consider that to be value-added ag, and that is counted as agriculture. And now it's not protected by the right to farm act, but it is counted as agriculture, and it can be classified that if they want to push that with their assessor or anybody else. However, if you do that, then you get locked into a whole other part of the rule, because what happens is you become ag, as they classify it as ag, your taxes will become ag, and you're very well defined yourself that you go up on a higher percentage per year in this county than what you will as residential, because agricultural property in this county increases in value every year. So that's the big dilemma you have there, that you need to do some site visits, because there's several livestock people, and you could even be talking about, he talked about coop, he laughed, but there's people out there that buy these chicken coops.
No, that's what I thought. I wanted to make sure I knew it was either.
And they have them, and I think, and we had it at this board about 2 years ago, where we had a concern where we had people who had chickens in downtown Bath. And we dealt with that. And then people keep people awake and so on and so forth.
That wasn't even here.
I think, again, the concern in the rural district, and to Jason's point, it's a double-edged concern. On one hand, I fully agree that the rights of farmers need to be preserved. As you previously said in the meeting, I think we all like food. I agree with that. I agree with Jason's point. Obviously, a farmer that has 2 acres as opposed to 40 shouldn't be at a disadvantage. I also am aware that there are many uses that are permitted by right and by special use in the rural district that are not farming. I think the character of that district is what we're trying to preserve here. And if you opt up, I think the best course of action would be to make the carve-outs for the uses that of our concern here. Because if you blanket up the percentage to where you feel like those uses will be covered, you open up the possibility for somebody to build something that maybe you didn't intend there to 50% on 100 acres, which is quite dense.
So it looks like we're asking that this be removed or,
Revisited or
yeah, well, that's the term you can use, to revisit this by giving it the planning commission. So the action would be to remove it at this time, go back to the planning commission, and then bring it back to us the next.
Jason has a motion on the floor that has not been seconded. It has been?
What was his motion?
I withdraw the motion.
I was just gonna say, I didn't think there was.
That took care of it right there. You're all set.
Yeah, that's okay.
Trustee Allen, Ricky, I was gonna take and second that for you, so in the spirit of boardmanship here and agriculture, and I'm really pleased to see you.
All right, do we want to do
stand up for
that?
farmers.
Trustee Benzie?
Yes.
You want it removed and brought it back?
No, I'll make a motion to send it back to the planning commission.
Thank you.
For a little more study.
to review the concerns that were raised tonight.
I'll second it.
All right.
Mr. Bensy?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes-Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work.
Thank you, Mouse.
That was a lot of work on that. All right. We have the ENG proposal for survey and staking the south end of Webster Road.
Thank you, Supervisor Howe. This proposal that is in front of you generated as a result of a meeting that we had here at the Township. Along with Township administration, we had attendance by the police department, the Drain Commission, and Road Commission, as well as some property owners at the southern end of Webster Road. The meeting generated as a result of some trespassing complaints at the private end of Webster Road that were made to the police department, and because it was unclear to the police department who owned what, we deliberated, and The request in front of you is to, it was originally to have Spicer Group, which did some survey work for the township several years ago, to come out and restake that property. Because they did not respond to the road commission's request, ENG was contacted, and I have trouble with that too. I never know whether to say Inc. or just ENG. So they were contacted to do the work at the end of Webster Road, and what you have in addition to my recommendation is their proposal for that work and what you would receive as a result of their work, which would be a skeleton topographic survey, an AutoCAD process base sheet and exhibit, property records research and survey layout, as well as field staking services for a cost not to exceed $5,145. The group that assembled believed that this would help us to understand what property right issues there were at the end of Webster Road and if additional work would be needed.
Because I have a discussion.
Please.
So the motion would be to accept or reject?
Gonna have some discussion here before we make
After,
a motion.
well, how we do it is you do your motion and then your discussion comes and then you vote.
Not necessarily. Go ahead.
That's what we're doing, so. Well,
Just ask your question if you have a question.
no, I will as soon as she's already put it down. She's explained it. Now you have to decide whether you're going to accept or reject it.
You
And
said you had a
we have
question.
I do.
So
And then
ask the
comes
question.
discussion. Guys, are we gonna do Robert's rules one way or are we gonna do it another way?
In Robert's rules, you can have discussion before a motion or
Or
after a
you
second.
can- That's correct.
Correct, correct.
And we've been following the way to have a discussion after it's been seconded.
Then don't ask your question, Marie.
I don't ask, I'll ask my question after, if you have a motion for what it is that you're looking to do. And then I'll have my question.
Do you know what fund we're gonna take it out of?
That's kind of what the discussion is that we're asking,
I
so.
had a question for the end. I
Yeah.
gotta think of
All right.
one.
I have a comment before so why are we paying for this when the residents should be paying for this? My understanding is that there's plat information and court documentation that suggests the ownership of that land and the road. So I don't know why we have a concern if the
We-
property owners.
I'm sorry, we paid to have it staked prior to Superintendent Dan Maticha leaving in 2019, we had it staked. The stakes are no longer there. So we were asking Spicer Group to come out and restake it. But because we're now dealing with a firm that is not familiar with the work, they're gonna have to redo some of the work.
Have we called Spicer and say, hey, can you return?
We
our-"
did, and they did not respond to the road commission.
I'm still waiting for the motion.
We know.
You
Thinking.
could have a second and we'll have a discussion. So if there's no motion, it's gonna die.
All right, I move we hire
So you move to accept.
ENG for $5,145.
Somebody gonna second that? 'Cause we had a
I
discussion.
have a question.
I know,
I'll-
so I have lots of questions.
I'll
but-
second it, providing you're gonna tell us where you spend the money from.
Okay,
The
Steve
expenditure
seconds
will
it.
be recorded in Fund 401, capital projects, capital outlay, land improvements, which contains $49,710 for Phase 1 of the Parkland Nature Trail.
Thank you. I'll second that.
Now, my question, thank you for the second, Steve, got a second, so discussion. If no one has a discussion, I have a question. So now my question is, similar to what Jason, trustee Almer and Jason asked, which had to do with where the money's coming from. This $49,710 that had been allocated, the group who supports the Park Lake Nature Trail has already been to court on this historically. And yes, it's true, the Spicer refused to do it, which I thought was kind of interesting. So they ended up going to a second surveyor. But because the courts had already determined where it was, I guess what we're now looking at is not so much the right-of-way, we're looking at what the line is,
Property lines.
what the property lines are. Because the court apparently had said whatever they said at that time, and we could ask questions.
If I could elucidate on this, I can enlighten
Would you
all of you,
please?
if that's okay.
Yes, please step up.
First of all, this is almost comedic to me, because all of the legal survey on all of this land is on LIBOR. If all of you own a house, you have a LIBOR that's recorded in the Register of Deeds. There's a LIBOR that specifically states the technical verbiage of the legal description of Webster Road and where the demarcation line is for all of this property. If, and this is on file, I have copies of it, it's been notarized, it's been certified by the circuit court judge in 1958, when this entire thing that you guys are talking about was gone over at that time, where 3 property owners ago did this exact same thing, and they sued the road commission and a couple of other private individuals down there, saying that that was their private road and and nobody else had a right to use it to the end of Webster Road. Yes.
So the thing is that I can't decipher that LIBOR.
No, because you're not a surveyor. But that technical verbiage, the section 22 lot.
That's what this proposal is for someone to decipher the LIBOR and mark it on the ground.
But it's already been done, and I actually.
No one knows where it's at.
Well, I guess my answer to that would be, then how could those people have purchased those private landowners, how could they have purchased that land? And incidentally, on those 2 private landowners' deeds, Register of Deeds, that is filed with the Register of Deeds in Clinton County, it specifically states, LIBOR 293, page 172, that specifically states in this circuit court ruling that the property line goes down the very center of Webster Road, all the way around, over the land bridge to where Park Key Drive used to be, which is where the edge of the woods is. And I had a meeting, and I'm sure we have notes of that, with Clinton County Legal Counsel and the Clinton County Road Commission. And the Clinton County Legal Counsel advised us and the Road Commission to put the onus back on the private landowners if they have a problem with it, because it's clearly stated on their deed and on the circuit court ruling of 1958. And so I don't think, and I'm not up here for the sake of argument. All I'm up here for is that this has already been decided long ago. It's all legalese. It's all been filed and ruled on, and we shouldn't be spending money to do it again. And in fact, this would be the 3rd time we'd paid to have this done. And just because the temporary wooden markers are kicked down by a private landowner, I don't think we need to spend money again.
Rebar stakes driven deeply into the soil.
Exactly.
They, 4 or 5 years ago, they were there, because I seen them.
I've seen them.
And they were in a round, looked like about a 4-inch cement with a rebar stake in the middle, with a ribbon on it. And I've seen both of them. Somebody must have taken them out, because they should still be there.
And historically, when a surveyor does do a survey like that, they actually do put in metallic rod. I mean, irrespective of where that wooden stake is with a little fluorescent tape on it, those are temporary. The permanent markers are always in the ground. They're still there. All you need to do is go over them with a and I'm not saying you go out there, but I guess what I'm just trying to say is I'm so exasperated because we don't need to pay, especially out of the trail fund, for a 3rd survey on this. I mean, it's totally redundant. And in fact, go ahead.
There is no trail fund. Let's stumble block. You have the capital projects fund, the money has been
Allocated.
allocated. It has
And
not
what was it
been-
allocated under?
It has not been, listen very carefully, it has not been appropriated.
Okay,
There's a
and,
difference.
and tell me why you're
There's
telling
no-
me,
There's no trail fund,
tell me why you're saying that.
because you just made a statement that's incorrect. There is no trail fund.
What was that money allocated for?
Trail,
Bingo.
not appropriated. Bingo.
What are you trying to say? That the money was not
No,
put
you're-
forth for a
you're
specific
incorrectly-
purpose?
You're incorrectly stating what the money is. The money is still in the capital projects.
I understand that. And you can use it for anything you want.
I wouldn't say
No,
that either.
no.
Okay.
No.
But anyway, we're getting off track here, but irrespective of the verbiage that I used that Steve felt was incorrect, I don't feel we should be spending money to triplicate a survey just because there are two private landowners that on their actual library that's on record states specifically the legal language that states that the property line literally goes down the very center of the road. And all of you know that there's also a 66-foot right-of-way for a road, which is owned by the county.
The county's telling us,
No.
the drain commission is telling us, they don't know where they don't know where this is at.
Well, they just had a $1 million water control structure built right on that. And I actually have the legal surveys that they filed to get those plans, those survey documents filed. I mean, you still have them in the file, the survey documents that show us precisely where those stakes are. And of course, you can't physically see them. And that's what I see us doing, is spending $5,000 the third time so that people can see the wooden stake in the ground.
Raymond,
Yes.
that's a quick question. Can you explain, Webster Road comes to a point, okay, it stops. Then you have access from there on. In order to build those houses, there had to be access to be able to put the two houses down there. But Webster Road ends at a point, and the agreement was, if I'm understanding, the agreement was that this access would be there for them to build the house, these two houses. If that is abandoned, for lack of a better term.
It has not been abandoned.
I know it hasn't. But if it is, that means that they have no way to get to their houses because that doesn't exist. Webster Road doesn't
There's actually a
exist
stop farm
beyond a
with
certain
access
point.
Okay,
So-
just a little bit of historical data. The
Okay.
Webster Road was platted and put in place, surveyed it and put in place before those houses were ever built.
Correct.
His house was
That's
built in
what I guess I'm
1993, I
saying.
believe.
The road stopped, and then access was given for them to build the house. The houses. They're not roads, that's not a Webster Road, that's an access.
Actually, it is Webster Road, goes right around in front of his house, all the way around
Alright,
past
so-
his house,
so what
over
you're
the water
saying
control
is
structure.
Webster Road extends all the way through.
Correct. And Fetch GIS, which is the legal, I'm sure you all know what Fetch GIS is, hopefully you do. That was just updated literally within 2 months ago to visually show you where the demarcation lines are. And if you look at them, you can tell they've upgraded it extensively. And of course, it's not legal, but you can go by that to show where it's at. And it goes right down the center of the road, all the way over into the woods past the water control structure.
Which is Webster Road.
Correct.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you. I hope I didn't muddy the waters too much. But I'm sure you all, if all of you who are homeowners had specific legal verbiage on the front of your deed that stated that your lot line is predetermined on the survey that is on file on Liber 293, page 172, dated 1958, in a circuit court lawsuit, that if you had an abstract or if you wanted to sell your house, that would come into play. And so I guess I still don't understand yet why we're going to try to spend more money to do this again when it's not necessary, when the law is on our, I mean, the law is the law. I mean, if you run a stop sign, you know there's a law saying you can't do that. And the law here states that the demarcation of Webster Road goes all the way around in front of Ken Terme's house into the woods past the water control structure. I mean, it states that right in the verbiage. And so the onus is on the person that says, no, that's not true. It's not on us to say, well, yeah, you do have to stop at a stop sign because it's stated right here. That's all I'm saying.
What would be the solution then? In other words, this is asking that it be surveyed.
Mhm.
Okay? And it's asking that that money be taken out of what doesn't exist, or placeholder for the treasurer.
I guess what
I'm trying to figure that out. So this 49,000 then becomes $5,000 less.
Mhm.
So is that correct? Am I understanding that
Well,
correctly?
I guess what I'm trying to say is, in a nutshell, is I would love it if you guys would put $5,000 into getting my lot surveyed, to show my neighbor, right there's where my fence is, and that's where it's supposed to go. Because that's what you're doing. You're paying, you're taking money from the township for a survey that's been done before, that's been documented, that is documented, to show these private landowners they're wrong because of their saying that this is fake news. That's basically what you're doing. And that's, and I thank you very, very much for letting me speak. And if any of you need to see the legal documentation, I have all of it. I've got it off from Microfiche from the county.
And I believe we had it all at our meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, and I hope you understand how exasperating it is. Yes, sir.
No, I'm your time, I'm all over, I want to speak.
Oh, okay. Can I stand here while you talk?
No, I don't know why, this is, I don't know why you wouldn't, I don't know why you would.
Yeah.
But is there a motion on this?
No.
All right, I'm gonna go,
No, Alan did it, you seconded it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's
Yes.
motion.
let's, would you?
Yes, we did, because
Would
we
you
had to
remove
do
your
that.
motion?
Tell me why.
Oh, depends on-
Yes.
How can I make a new motion?
Let's make a deal.
Does
If,
anybody?
if you remove your second,
I'll make a friendly amendment to this motion, because I was in this meeting, I sat right there in the center of that with about everybody from the county you could think of, where they took and they come up with this. And it was the road commission that come up with this. And since we were dealing with this, and whether or not this is, the question is, you say this is a road.
I don't say it's a road. I'm saying the circuit court ruled it was a road.
Okay, yeah, that's all the more reason to
That's
do
close
this.
enough.
I would move, as a friendly amendment, if you take this money, how much is this money? $5,400?
$5,400.
$5,400,
$145.
and you pay this out of the road fund, and you amend the road fund to pay for it, not to exceed $5,400, just as the road commission told us it should be done, and have this staked by ENG, and once and for all, we're gonna put this thing to bed for the road commission so they can determine what needs to happen here. And that way, you're not spending any money out of the capital projects fund, you're not spending it, and that should make him happy. And what you're gonna do here is you're gonna take and you're gonna create some sort of a solution here. We're gonna find out exactly where the lot lines are, and they'll be able to move forward with what they talked about in this meeting. The drain commissioner will be happy, because he'll know where his line is, and the road commission people will be happy, and that'll be the end of it, with the staking of the road, and they'll get their information, whatever they're gonna do with it. Well, that's my motion, my friendly amendment to your motion.
and I'll second that motion. Amendment. But I was at the same meeting, and this is what the county told us to do.
That's really kind of sad.
The drain
because-
commissioner and the county road commissioner.
I don't know. No, I'm
You
just,
just admitted they own the road.
they own the
So
road.
why don't we pay the money and?
I'm all for it. You're speaking my words right there. You know, it's not up to the township for us. We don't even have a dog in this fight, really. We're just trying to be an emissary, and that's what Karen's trying to do, is to keep the township happy, you know, the residents happy. But in 1958, the road commission was held harmless. I mean,
People it was in 1958 were my cousins.
yeah, everybody's your
It
cousin.
was owned by
Hey,
my relation.
everybody's your cousin.
I'm very familiar with what's going on here.
I'd like to call the question, please.
That was a working farm for what it's worth.
Right, big farm.
Yes, and that was, access was given, and it was a handshake agreement between them and the people at the time who owned the sod farm. There's actually a third party involved in this, because there's 40 acres of land that he owns as well, it's connected to this thing.
And that's off to the south, west.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second, we have a friendly amendment, that's what you want to call it, to that motion.
A friendly motion, a friendly
So,
second.
Okay, so, now we need, okay, any discussion, any more?
Now you go for the question.
Mr. Almery.
I called the question.
That's exactly right. You did call the
Discussion is
question.
over.
And that's what I'm saying, the vote now needs to be taken.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
I'm gonna say, I don't think it should come out of that funds, no. Only for that reason.
Mr. Wissaucer?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We have the Webster Road Sanitary Sewer Improvement, which is CB under new business.
Thank you. What you have in front of you here is a proposal to execute lateral televising, which is a nice way of saying videoing underneath the road and looking at the sewer pipe and the laterals which come off of the pipe and go to the residences and the businesses along Webster Road for a cost not to exceed $6,950. This is also to include a cost from Brian Newhoff for the Webster Road Sanitary Sewer Rehabilitation, for a cost of $23,000. As well, I included language in my recommendation, if approved, an accompanying budget amendment would be needed to the sewer fund. We have not televised under Webster Road, the sewer pipes under Webster Road for a couple of years now. It is critical that if we are to line this Webster Road, that we are to take a look at the pipe and the laterals that are going off to each home. If not, when we line, if we don't line correctly, significant damage could be done later when we do additional work on Webster Road. So this is for those services.
How much is in the sewer fund?
He knows where it is.
How much is in there?
As of the 31st
Is
of
fund
2021.
balance? How much is in there?
Yeah.
Is this a test, or you just?
No, 'cause what you- no. What was
read?
read is that we have $6,950 expenditure along with
You
$23,000
got
expenditure.
$6,000 with a $13 million sewer system.
Exactly.
No
So
kidding.
That's what I'm asking. So why would you need a budget amendment?
Because you're gonna spend a lot of fund balance that's not budgeted for,
Well, that's what
otherwise
I'm
that'd
saying.
be
How
an
much
illegal
is-
expenditure, that's
how
why you
much
need
is-
to do that. I don't know, I'd have to go back and look
Okay.
at the
So we
expenses.
don't know the dollar amount.
I wasn't prepared to
No.
ask that question to tell you.
I
what
wasn't
exactly
prepared to ask
it
that question until the dollar amount came out.
is. I'm kinda tired tonight, I don't know if I can look this up, I guess maybe you guys will have to count this against me. I guess we could go to the index, look at the index.
Didn't we just put 130,000 in that account?
That's what I
We-
From SCULA.
Yes.
From SCULA.
Yeah.
That was the
So
dollar
there's at
amount that
least
was left over.
130,000.
So, okay. Louise,
At least.
you're off the hook. Trustee Almarigi.
I move to authorize the superintendent to expend funds for lateral televising, not to exceed the $69,950, as well as a solicitor proposal for engineering services for a cost of $23,000 to be paid for by budget amendment, Fund 590.
That's the sewer fund, correct?
That's what
Yes.
that's for the sewer fund dollars, so it comes to 29,000.
And the
Nine-
950.
Sewer fund balance.
Okay.
590-560-801.000.
I'll second that.
We're just watching
He's
you.
gonna fund it.
That's all right. That's,
Unrestricted net assets of the sewer system fund are $5,985,550.
Thank you for what.
so
On the
we have
computer, you
five-
can search the term. It makes it much easier.
Yeah.
So it's 5 million,
Almost 6 million.
or 6 million in the sewer fund.
Fund.
And that includes food
Unrestricted.
of unrestricted dollars,
Right.
correct?
Yes.
That's unrestricted net assets.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, our next item, 14, apparently there's cancellation of the August 29th special meeting.
So now that you've made it all the way through all of these items,
I
the
know, I'm looking
unthinkable,
at
and
it at the
it's
time going, holy smokes.
8:41,
We've
I
moved
at
right
this
along.
time would have no further business for the August 29th meeting that we called special, and therefore would request that you cancel it.
I move we cancel the August 29th meeting,
Second.
So you're using
2022.
it for a budget?
What?
No, the budget won't be out yet.
Got it.
No.
Okay.
I'll second that motion, Alan.
Thank you. Was that a friendly second?
You want to adjourn now?
Oh, God, don't forget it.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wisswasser?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Thank you.
5,985, 550. Is that what you
Okay.
told us?
Is that what you
That's
said?
Say
what
yes.
said.
Say yes, keep it
Okay,
going.
stay good. 5, 9.
5,985, 550, page 17.
I was gonna say what page is it?
As of December 31st, 2021.
17.
You like analog, so
I
here
do
you
like
go.
it. You're such a big
Steve,
man.
thanks for hanging in there and finding that for me.
It's page 17.
Page
so there you go.
17.
Yep.
I'm gonna write that down.
It's such a joy.
Very.
Okay.
I don't feel that way. I don't feel alone.
Good, because I don't think there is anything. Okay, superintendent report.
Thank you. I will be brief. As you know, the CDC guidelines have changed for COVID locally. So we will be adjusting our township protocols to adhere to those guidelines, although we have been told by the emergency operations team to expect an uptick in cases as students head back to school. As I indicated in a previous Friday report, the county has additional PPE, which included masks, hand sanitizer, gloves, and suits. I don't want the suits, but we will be taking a stock inventory of what we have here and seeing what we can utilize for both the office, our our public emergency officers, fire and police, as well as the upcoming November election, because that will be right in the midst of probably the uptick. There was a spike in E. coli at Park Lake Beach, which occurred last week, and I reported on that in the Friday report. I'm happy to report that they retested, and the results today were in the normal lower ranges. So at this time, there is nothing to be concerned about. They cannot indicate from a site visit what they thought the spike was related to. But I do know that from the Park Lake Advisory Board and different groups have told me that some geese have returned to the area. We will continue our efforts with both the Mid-Michigan Health Department, they will continue to test the water until just after Labor Day. And we will continue to work with Busters, which I think has been a huge help this year in minimizing the E. coli effects that we saw last year, which kept our beach closed for most of the swim season. I think that effort and that recommendation by the Park Lake Advisory Board was extremely helpful. And I think we should continue with that because we did not see the problems this year that we saw previously. So I think that was a win for our township.
Are we still considering a ordinance change?
We are. I actually haven't spoken on that with Dan Hayes in some time. He had some surgery. I won't go further than that, but I've not touched base with him on that since before that happened. So I will retouch base with him because I believe that Park Lake Advisory Board thought that was a critical part of helping in this fight against the geese staying around. So yes, we will continue with that. You should see that probably in the next month or so. I'll follow up with him.
Thanks.
You're welcome, and thank you for asking. The police did conduct interviews today. We do have one current open spot, and I believe there were at least 2 interviews. There could have been more interviews, but I was aware of 2. And we will also be conducting dishwasher interviews next week. I believe we have 2 candidates for the dishwasher position at the senior center. Since we lost our previous dishwasher, we have been using styrofoam, which people really dislike. It's difficult for us to take to be recycled. And we'd like to get back to using the dishware that we were using before, which people much prefer. So we're going to be trying to fill that position. Questions, please?
You said the police did interviews. What was that for?
There's an open position since Colin Reneker went back to the
Okay, so
county.
they're filling that
Yeah.
position. Okay.
Yep. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of applicants.
Do we know the salary?
I don't. I have to consult the union contract.
Thank
I'm
you.
all set. Thank you.
Any questions? No, guess we're good. Public statement, which would be item 16. No public statement? Okay. Board comments. Now you get your chance. But you hadn't had one for a while. So. Jason? Up. Trustee Almeridge.
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay. Trustee Benson.
I'm all set, thank you.
Treasurer. Response.
Thank you. I got a couple of comments tonight. Number one, if I'm not mistaken, Brendan, my precinct, voting precinct is number 3, is that correct?
Yes.
At the school, middle school. This is a FYI, as a township board member and a resident of the community. We use the school museum complex in precinct 3 as a voting precinct.
Yes.
My wife and I voted down there. We chose to vote in person versus voting in absentee ballot. I have a complaint not about the township, not about the voting, not about anything else, but the school's maintenance system for their sidewalks entering into the school museum complex is terrible. It's if you look down there and you look at the sidewalk going through there, it's older sidewalk. I'm not saying we got to replace the sidewalk, but there's grass growing up this tall. You have to walk over, walk around, and everything else. People in our township are going there to vote, and they're going there to take and cast their ballot. And I would really hate to see somebody trip and fall and sprain an ankle, my wife especially, or somebody like that who has issues with this. And I think that the township, since we're going to rent this facility or whatever we do, whatever our arrangement is to use this facility, I think before the November elections, you should send somebody down there from the DPW crew and have them get an agreement with the school, whatever's got to be done, and straighten this sidewalk situation out. So when you walk in and out, you're not wading through the grass and tripping over what's growing up between the pieces of cement. I realize it's kind of trivial. I'm not finding fault with the school for whatever reason. When I look around this facility, and I walk around this facility, I go to these other facilities, in Victor Township over the weekend at a family function in the pavilions over there, and anywhere I go in municipalities, we don't have sidewalks that's got grass growing up on where people are tripping over it, and people are potential for liability. And I just feel if we're gonna hold elections there, that needs to be addressed and looked at, and it wouldn't take our DPW crew that long to help them out, and I don't think it would spend us a lot of money out of our township to do that for the use of the building. Second thing I got, I commend you, trustee Al Marigi, for being here tonight. I hope that you continue to be here. You're a very good person in our Lord, and I'm sorry that your election maybe didn't go the way you wanted it to go, but thank you for coming tonight, and I hope you keep coming until the end. We need you. Your input is appreciated.
I agree.
That's all I got.
Oh, it's my turn. Thank you all for coming. We spent a lot of time here, which is very much appreciated, to say the least. I look forward, hopefully someday, to the two-way communication so that people will be able to see what we're doing and talk.
Someday.
So, someday. As you've said many times. But thank you again. I do have, but I did not bring them tonight, I do have some for the next meeting, which, by the way, is when? September 6th. That's what I thought. Okay. Thank you again.
Which is on Tuesday.
It's on a Tuesday.
Yes, because of the holiday.
Yes.
I don't have
No,
anything.
we're waiting for them.
I don't have anything.
I have nothing.
I know that the clerk has done elections before, but I wanted to give her a shout out for running a transparent and fair election, which is really important in our country. And so thank you for all your hard work and your staff. That's it.
I move we adjourn.
I was going to say, you always have motions to support. Yes, you support it.
Ms. Butler Challenger, yes. Ms. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wissaucer?
Yes.
Mr. Benzi?
Yes.
Mr. Almarigi?
Yes.
Mr. Funes Bliss?
Yes.
Mr. Rosecrans?
Yes.
Thank you.
We are official. It is time to adjourn.